That's the way they used to write songs in this country. What you can't have is a universe where you have a sovereign God and an autonomous creature. And only if you think of human freedom as rising to the level of autonomy do you have this problem. But nowhere does the Bible ever teach that human beings have been given autonomy by God. On the contrary, autonomy is the illegitimate, illicit reach of creatures made in submission to a sovereign God. You know what we read in creation, that when God put Adam and Eve in the garden, and I have to take the watch out again, I got to finish this quick. What did he say? You live in this garden, and you're not allowed to do anything. I have all these trees with all these beautiful foods there in the garden I've made, but you can't avail yourself of any of it. Don't you touch any of those trees, because if you touch a single tree in that garden, you will die. Is that what God said? That's what the devil said that God said. But that's not what God said. Here's the first introduction of the concept of freedom. Of all of the trees in the garden, you may freely eat. Except this one over here. You may not eat of that. If you do, you die. What God gave human beings in creation was the ability to make choices. But that ability was not unlimited. It was limited. Of all the trees, God said over here, you may freely eat. But you can't just do anything you want to do. There are limits to your freedom. There are restrictions to your freedom. And the thing is this, God is free, and his creatures are free. But God is more free than his creatures. Now that's simple. You would think it would be simple. But here's the kind of stuff I hear all the time in the church. See if you've heard this one. God's sovereignty is limited by human freedom. Have you ever heard that? Beloved, that's not good theology. That's blasphemy. Because you say that God's sovereignty is limited by your freedom. Who's sovereign? You are. You're given now autonomy. You're given freedom that exceeds the freedom of God himself. Here's one even worse. God saves as many people as he possibly can. You know, he'd like to save everybody. He does the best he can. But if he would work in your heart to change your heart without your permission, he'd be violating your freedom. And so God can't save you unless you want to be saved. And the sinner in hell would give everything he had and do anything he could to get rid of that freedom that kept God from saving him. On the road to Damascus, Saul of Tarsus did not ask Christ to save him. When God intruded into my life through his sovereign good pleasure and changed the disposition of my heart, I wasn't seeking him. I didn't ask him to come in. He came. That's how he came to you. He didn't destroy my freedom. He elevated it. Because until he did that, I was a slave to my own wicked inclinations. Now, in the doctrine of providence, we talk about the doctrine of concurrence. How there can be the choices of God at the same time there are choices of men. And how God works through the choices of human beings without annihilating our choices. God did not rob Joseph's brothers of their freedom. Joseph's brothers did exactly what Joseph's brothers wanted to do. God didn't coerce them. God didn't force them. But God exercised his sovereignty through their free decisions. That's an amazing thing. It is a good thing. And I rejoice that my freedom never places a limit on God. If I choose to do anything that I do, if I choose to raise my hand right now as an exercise of volition, my mind has decided it would be a good thing for me to raise my hand, and that notion somehow is communicated to the body, and their interaction between non-extension and extension takes place in this activity where I raise my hand. What if God didn't want me to raise my hand?